Well, in the national capital, home buyers, developers and experts all unite to ask the government to review the circle rates in Delhi. Now, in several places, the circle rates are higher than even the market value. Experts say that this will give a rise to black money and give a rise to lack of transparency in an already crippled market. Deepa Rana and Arun Rangaswamy have this report.
The real estate market in Delhi has been sluggish over the last couple of years. While economic factors and project delays have played their part, one of the major reasons for slow sales is also Delhi's sky-high circle rates.
Actually, the circle rates in many parts of Delhi has gone beyond what the real prices are, and it's very ironic because there was a time when the circle rates were extremely low compared to what the market prices were, and now it's the reverse, where the market prices are above what the circle rates are. So if they are revised down, yes, it will encourage some of the investors to come back into the market.
Put simply, circle rate is the government-determined rate below which a property cannot be registered. This is typically reviewed once every year. When the circle rate is unrealistically high as compared to prevailing market rates, buyers are charged stamp duty on these rates rather than the lower rate at which they have bought or sold the property, thus increasing their tax burden.
Could be anywhere from 10% to 100% depending on the kind of product, the location, etc. For example, land, it could vary from 10% to 300%. Property, or as in apartments or built-up products, it could be 10% to 50%.
The Delhi government has increased circle rates 4 times since 2011. As complaints increased from traders about circle rates being higher than the market prices of properties in many areas, the Aam Aadmi Party administration decided to review the prevailing circle rates in Delhi. However, that too is hanging fire.
The Aam Aadmi Party government has formed a committee to review the current circle rates in the national capital. However, the Revenue Department officials tell us that the review has been put out for public suggestions, but with the ongoing turf war between the Lieutenant Governor as well as the Aam Aadmi Party government, it seems that the review on the circle rates of the national capital has been put in cold storage.
Well, developers and analysts say that this policy paralysis and delay in reviewing the circle rates is having a direct impact on your and my ability to buy a home in the city of Delhi. Joining me on the show this evening, Naresh Gupta is an advocate who's been fighting this battle in the Supreme Court. Also on the show with me, Ramesh Menon, Director of Certes Realty, and Pankaj Kapoor, Managing Director of Liases Foras. I want to start first with Naresh Gupta. Mr. Gupta, thank you for joining us. This is an ongoing battle. Explain, according to the arguments that you had made at the Supreme Court, explain to our viewers.
Good evening everybody.
Good evening. What is the impact that this has on a normal citizen of Delhi who's hoping to buy a home?
Madam, before commenting upon the issue, I would like to point out that Delhi has been divided into 8 categories from A to H.
Yes.
For the residential areas, and circle rates for each categories have been listed by the government, below which these properties cannot be registered.
Yes.
The registering authorities are directed to follow the circle rates for the purpose of registration of the properties. The circle rates were firstly notified in 2007, and over a passage of time there has been hike in the circle rates from time to time. The major hit was done in 2012 when in A category colonies in Delhi, the circle rates were increased by 300%. That means the circle rates from 2,15,000 per square meter of the land area were immediately hiked to 6,45,000 per square meter. That was a major setback because the ground realities were never looked into by the government. All the ground realities were basically not taken care of, and the property prices since 2012 have been a dip, but the circle rates kept on increasing.
Yes.
And in the last increase was made by the Delhi government in 2014 when the president rule was in force, and ever since then the property, unless the property prices are matched with the circle rates, the real estate market is not going to pick up, because it creates a heavy burden of stamp duty on the proposed buyer investor, and besides the payment of the stamp duty, there is a extra burden of the income tax liability, because under the provisions of Income Tax Act also, if you purchase a property which is far below than the circle rates, then the additional difference between the market value and the circle value is charged as income in the hands of the seller also, as well as in the hands of the buyer also.
Yes.
So avoiding this kind of situation, the buyer and the seller intend not to enter into any transactions, and the transactions virtually fail, and the entire area, the A category area, which I can name New Friends Colony, Maharani Bagh, Panchsheel Park and the like, the transactions have virtually hit. They have basically, the downfall is occurring due to the circle rate anomaly in the existing policies.
All right, let me bring in Ramesh Menon. Ramesh Menon, you're actually functioning on the ground. Tell us what the situation of the market is like in Delhi right now. How many apartments are being sold on a monthly or a quarterly basis? And how badly is the circle rate, like Mr. Gupta was telling us, how badly is the circle rate and affecting sales right now in an already very, very painful market?
Actually, when you talk about the circle rate, you'll have to split it into two. One is the land component of it. The other is the plotted. Mr. Gupta did eloquently walk us through the apartment side of work. And I know for a fact that, the sales are almost as much down as 80% on both the product categories. You see the income tax problem, the taxation besides, if you look at the land per se, the circle rate anomaly, which was created by this difference of opinion between probably the Union of India and the Delhi government, has brought down the sales by almost 80% since 2015, when this confusion between two circulars issued by the Delhi government and the LG's office came into being. So, Mr. Gupta is pretty right that the transactions are the first casualty because of this confusion in the circle rate on the land side, and on the product side or the apartment side, the issue is that the circle rates are much higher than the prevailing market prices in many areas of Delhi.
All right, Pankaj, obviously this matter has been gone back and forth right now between the LG and the Delhi government, but ideally, for someone to be able to get this Delhi market to move again, from a buyer's point of view, what is it that we need on the ground in Delhi from the government? What expectations can we have from this government?
Certainly I want recalibrations of the circle rates, which they have to consider, and if they know that the current prices are not selling. And not only it gives a big implications in terms of economic viability, where the consumer has to pay higher income tax if the circle rate are higher than the property transaction values, seller as well as buyer. But there is another implication, because most of the cost of the development of the project is also linked to the circle rate. So if you look at deficiency premium or any FSI premium, any other kind of a premium which the developer has to pay, it is linked to the circle rate. Mostly that is considered to, if the circle rate has increased, so it also increases the cost. And that's a basic reason. If you look at the circle rate, eventually act as a kind of a floor below which the prices fails
Pankaj,
to go down.
I know that you specifically spend a lot of your time doing research in real estate. And we both know, although it's a unsaid thing, we both know that the numbers are very easy to get for a Gurgaon or a Noida or a Faridabad. But actually Delhi is already a heavily black market system right now. It's even difficult to find out what the trading values of property is, because so little of it happens completely white over the table that can be recorded. Tell us what your experience is when you attempt to record numbers in the Delhi market.
It's like, I don't say that it's difficult to find out the right value of the property. There's enough data available across public domain also, which tells what's the trading values in the market. Question is how many people they use it, and we sit down and look back and say that if the circle rate is much below the transacted property value, and then most of the people will try to register the property at much lower, and then it will give rise to the black money. But the enforcement directorate and all those things, they start using the data which is available in the public domain. They can still catch hold of the people.
But when you are doing the research, what is that like?
Research being like, there was in past circle rates were much lower when the transaction was really happening. I mean to say that when the black money component was being employed in the market at that given point of time, certainly the circle rate was much lower. But the surge in the circle rate happened post that when the property transaction virtually dried down. So I don't really see the logic why we are trying to raise the prices when government knows that the circle rate is not, and that's what is also most of the urban bodies or the municipality, if you look at their revenue has been declining post the increase of the circle rate. When they know that when the property transaction has reduced, there's no point raising and making it at par with the market value.
Right.
By doing
and especially
that,
given the fact that Gurgaon has actually seen a reduction in circle rates of 15%.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's no reason why Delhi shouldn't also consider it.
Absolutely. Not only Delhi, I would say that even Maharashtra or Mumbai should also follow the suit.
All right. Ramesh Menon, if we look at the numbers that are flashing on our screen right now, Category A's lower trading value on land at least is about 400,000 rupees per square meter. But the circle rate is close to 774,000 rupees per square meter. There's a huge mismatch here. And if Pankaj is also telling us that, transactions have nearly dried up. Have prices corrected even further? What is the outlook right now on the market in Delhi? Who's buying, if at all? And what are home buyers doing? Because at the end of the day, people need to buy homes.
I'd like to highlight two factors. When you're talking about the circle rate on a category basis, then it's only a band, let's say between 400,000 and 800,000, because the property prices cannot be, based on an established basis for a large, number of properties. Having said that, this problem has come up more because there was no scientific basis of going about this increment. You see, the base data is what was the previous increment. It did not get established over a fresh research of any sort. So if you look at, let's say, properties, whether it is in the A category or H category. Specifically, if I talk about H category, let's look at just Lal Dora as a component, whether it is Munirka in the south of Delhi or whether it is Chawlla in the northwest of Delhi, the base price is the same today. But if you look at the market price, it has almost a 1:20 kind of a component of the selling price. So, there are transactions happening in the higher priced categories, but the buyer is more of a corporate nature, is not the individual apartment buyer. Mm-hmm. What has got hit is the mid segment, which was between the 200,000 to 500,000 rupees per square meter kind of a product. The Uber category is trading the transactions do happen there, and the DDA flats keep selling. But the bulk of the supply was in the mid segment, which is where the transactions have dried down. The other factor is, if you just look at the data of the Delhi government revenue collection from property registration, that tells a story of where the actual fall is.
Naresh Gupta, the argument that you had put forward as well, that this sort of high circle rates will encourage more black money in a system where we're trying to fight black money. The fact that people who are making honest transactions, like the other two panelists have told us, will be discouraged at this point because the taxation is just far too high and far too ridiculous. And it actually encourages those people who are making fully black transactions. Do you actually believe that that's a road we're going further and further down if the government doesn't reconsider what they're doing with circle rates right now, at least in the city of Delhi?
There are kinds of people in Delhi who do not follow the procedure of law. They just finish up the transactions and just hide the transaction from the tax authorities also, from the registration authorities also, just to save the stamp duty as well as the taxation angle. Until and unless the rationalized figure is arrived at by the government, these people will kept on encouraging the transactions deals which do not and escape the stamp duty and taxation angles from the public. You can just see an example from the New Friends Colony area, where the circle rate of the property is around 33 crores, whereas the actual values of the properties varies between 16 to 20 crores. So there is an extra burden of the payment of stamp duty from the buyer's angle. You end up paying the higher stamp duty, you end up paying the higher tax liability. So there are kinds of people which do hide the actual transaction from the tax authorities and resort to documentation in that field, so that the transactions are basically hid from the government. So the higher circle rates end up encourage the peoples to resort to such kind of unfair practices in the eyes of law.
In fact,
definitely it is encouraging the people to resort to some unfair practices.
My other question, of course, Naresh Gupta, is the fact that we have a government right now who is gunning for housing for all. What sort of housing for all are we going to have when, even if the pricing of housing is coming down, the government is not willing to let go of its extra few rupees of profit to make it accessible truly for all Indians? Somehow we are completely missing the bus here, at least in the city of Delhi, on housing for all.
You may kindly see the data is available in the Delhi government. In the 2012, there was a collection of around 3,000 crores of rupees for the stamp and registration collection.
Yes.
And in 2013 and 14, there was a negative growth. And in 2015-16, there was a collection of around 2,900 crores, which was well below the mark of 2012.
Yes.
The picture very well speaks of itself. On account of this anomaly and discrepancies in the circle rates policy, the collection of revenue is going dip by dip, and every day it is dipping by day and night. So just to encourage the investors and just to encourage the end users, the government is to bring down these circle rates, so that the property prices are also brought down, and it is a win-win situation for the government also and for the end users and the investors also, because government will be end up receiving the higher stamp duties, higher tax authorities, and it is a real estate sector the entire real estate sector will going to be push up. It is a win-win situation for the properties buyer also, as well as for the government also.
Well, Kuldip Chawlla has just joined us as well. Kuldip Chawlla is managing partner at Ask Strategies in Real Estate. Kuldip, thank you for joining us. We're talking about the circle rates, and this is a problem that, while is specifically hurting the Delhi market, it's also beginning to hurt markets across the country, because we're seeing prices sort of adjust from the weak market that we have, but none of the governments really are prepared to sort of also bring down what we call ready reckoner rates or circle rates across the country. How important is it, even if we start with Delhi, for the government, and here in this case, whether that is the Lieutenant Governor or the Aam Aadmi Party-led government, there's still a toss-up between whose responsibility it is to do this. But how important is it that this be done right away?
I think it's extremely important that it be done immediately from 2 points of view. Point number one is that of the buyer, end user, investor, whichever way you want to classify them. And that is because of two reasons. One, where the seller, for example, is seeing an anomaly between the market rate and the circle rate, where the circle rates, as was said in the show a couple of minutes earlier, in several instances, and this is more particularly true in Delhi than in the suburbs of Gurgaon and Noida, the circle rate, difference between the circle rate and the market rate is substantial. They're holding back. The buyer, on the other hand, is then left with a quagmire of who is going to pay for the difference. And then the result is that the government doesn't see a transaction happen and loses out on the stamp duty and registration charges. So I don't see who is the winner. But I think it's also behoves industry associations, and the general public and other people who are interested in this to present this data, quarter on quarter, half year on half year, year on year, to the government for them to realize this. On the other hand, you do have instances in the suburbs, for example, where Gurgaon hasn't raised rates for 2 years, Noida has been rethinking. And I think both these suburbs, which are large transactions in the Delhi NCR, have seen some impact. Now, truth be told, it's not that if circle rates fall down, transactions will grow up, increase dramatically. But you don't want one more piece of bad news, in a market which is not seeing recovery.
That's a fair point.
The final point I'd like to make is that, the issue of difference in rates impact secondary transactions relatively more than they do primary transactions. But I have two other quick points to make. One is this. The other is this whole issue of, if we're talking about affordable housing, how do we hope to make housing for all and housing affordable in this country if we don't address this issue squarely?
That's a very good point. And
this issue is there right now. It will get worse because in markets where you've got both affordable housing and sort of, let's say, value for money luxury housing, and you don't differentiate between circle rates, in the same sector, you're going to have a problem.
Right. I want
to. This problem is not far away because
before we run out of time,
are you telling me
Kuldip,
that
I want to bring in Naresh Gupta one more time because Naresh Gupta, if I'm not mistaken, in 2015 December, there was a High Court ruling in the city of Delhi. The High Court of Delhi allowed some cases to register below the circle rate, provided they were able to, in this
case, registration of the properties.
Provided they were allowed to convince the collector of stamps as to why they were pricing below circle rate.
I must apprise you on that issue.
Yes.
There was a judgment of Delhi High Court in December 2015, wherein the Honorable Court clearly held that if the value of the property is below the circle rates, then the sub-registrar concerned will accept the document, and the sub-registrar concerned will send the document to the collector of stamps for adjudicating its value. There is a provision called Section 47A in the Indian Stamp Act, which is applicable to Delhi, which says that when the property value is far below than the circle rates, then the collector will adjudicate the value of the property, and if the value of the property is found to be reasonable, then the collector will send back the paper to the registrar authorities, and he will deliver the paper back to us. I mean, if he comes to conclusion that the value of the property is at par with the circle rate, then he will take the additional stamp duty. But the problem here in this case is the one or two matters are lying with the collector for the last more than 6 to 8 months, and he has not been able to deliver his judgment on the topic because he says there is no set formula set by the government how to value the property. There is no guidelines issued by the government to the collector for the purpose of Section 47A, and there is no data available with him. And in the absence of all these things, there is a problem with the end user because the person might have bought the property from some bank loan or some loan from the financial institution, and he is not being able to enjoy his property for the last so many years. So the people tend to pay the stamp duty right away and doesn't want to go in for that collector stamps process, because that is a very cumbersome process under law.
Is it the responsibility here of
the government in this regard,
of the state government, or is it the responsibility of the Lieutenant Governor right now to relook at the circle rates? Because that's a back and forth that's happened in Delhi now for the last couple of months. Nobody knows where the responsibility finally lies.
Yeah, definitely it's the responsibility of the state government as well as the Lieutenant Governor, because of this problem the end user and the general public is suffering. The general public is facing so many hardships, and I being into real estate consultant, I do face daily problem, and daily transactions do fail on this account. This is the problem for the entire area.
Right, the problem for the entire
area. This has to be clear.
There has to be clarity, at least for the citizens of Delhi on the circle rate. And just to bring our viewers up to speed and to help you understand, if you haven't understood what the circle rate is, or what we call a ready reckoner rate here in Mumbai, in Delhi it's called a circle rate. Basically, it's a rate the government sets for the notional value of your property. You cannot register or sell for lower than that because the government doesn't want you to do a half black, half white deal. That's how they can tell that you're selling below the market rate. But what's happened over the last few years is the prices have come down. The circle rate or the ready reckoner rate has constantly gone up. And now there's a massive mismatch where you're selling at lower, but you're actually paying higher taxes. Pankaj Kapoor, across most of our cities, we've never seen circle rates come down.
Absolutely.
Isn't that true?
No, it is. Like most of the times, I think, except Gurgaon, which has reduced, and most of the cities I have seen, the circle rate has really maintained. And I just want to really further add to it, like government really acts as a capitalist. No one wants to reduce their own revenue margins. And I think they are failing in order to understand the productivity of price. They see that by increasing the prices, their revenue will increase. The past data, whether Maharashtra or whether Delhi or any other state, if you look back, or any municipality, by increasing the ready reckoner rate, they have reduced the prices. There have been only one instance, which was in 2002 or 2003 in Mumbai, when the stamp duty for commercial property, when it got reduced, there were more revenue when they made. So I just want to add to the government official that they should not look the prices from the point of view the higher prices will add to higher revenues. They should look at the productivity of prices, whether the transaction is happening or not happening.
Ramesh Menon, closing statements before we move on this debate.
One quick point. You see, when we are talking about the policy of housing for all, etc., let us not bring in the equation of New Friends Colony and Defense Colony and the Tony areas, where the supply of total dwelling units will not be more than, say, 2,000 to 3,000 dwelling units. Look at where the actual demand lies. We need 1.6 million dwelling units to be created in Delhi. It has to come from creating more urbanizable or urbanized areas. That is where the circle rate anomaly is hitting the most. On the one side, we are talking about land pooling and creating about 65,000 new acres of residential development plus commercial plus infrastructure and making Delhi a truly global megapolis. So so my submission to the government as well as public at large is, let us look at what will impact the correction of circle rates in New Friends Colony and such areas. Yes, it has to be pragmatic, but the actual demand lies, about 80% of the supply that needs to be created should be in the 20 to 50 lakh per dwelling unit kind of product price category. So we need to accelerate the process there, where 53 lakhs per acre suddenly increased to 3 crores, and within a week of the notification of one department, let's say the Chief Minister's office, the LG contradicts it. And today, like Mr. Naresh Gupta says, I have had cases in the SDM's office lying for adjudication for the last 8 to 9 months. And mind you, this is after the transaction has been consummated, which would mean that the buyer has paid the money to the seller and the mutation process has not happened. So what does the investor do? He stops investing and thereby the process of urbanization stops. So we have to take that into account. So that's what I feel the more pragmatic approach real quickly, trying to bring in the experts from private sector who will have a last mile reach into each colony and establish a very near perfect kind of a circle rate, not basing it on something which happened 15 years back.
See, unfortunately, we've run out of time on this debate, and I want to thank our panelists, but it's very clear that whether it's the city of Delhi or it's any other city in this country right now, the property market and the ability of normal citizens to be able to go out and buy property depends on the government understanding what's going on. And it just seems like in Delhi, the government has an inability to understand the fundamental functioning of the market. Increasing and keeping your circle rates unreasonably high when the market is weak is actually going to, place a foot on the throat of something that's already struggling to breathe at this point. And that's unfair to the industry, and it's more unfair to the customer. If you have something to share with us on circle rates, if there's an experience that you'd like to share with us, our contact details are on your screen.
You can watch live TV on our website, mpnow.in. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Magicbricks Now. And don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at Magicbricks Now. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/Magicbricks Now.